Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ali Janayanlar. Fresh off his inauguration and the unveiling of his new cabinet, Turkey's President-Recep-Tayyip-Erdogan headed to Brussels to attend the annual NATO Leaders Summit. Many were expecting a tense atmosphere as Turkey's relations with the 60-plus-year alliance have been shaky these past few years. Ever since a failed military coup 2 years ago, the Turkish government has implemented stricter measures at home and drastically changed its policies abroad. Moves that have raised eyebrows among some NATO partners. The U.S. recently warned about Turkey's drift towards Russia, saying it could threaten the alliance's compatibility. Despite the recent setback, NATO leaders displayed a show of unity, especially in regards to Turkey. The 29-member bloc vowed to protect Turkey's southern border from terrorism and along its border where Washington and Ankara have been most at odds, mainly due to the U.S.'s support for the YPG terror group in Northern Syria. So, what does this all mean for Turkey's position in NATO and its changing relations with other countries like Russia? Well, to discuss this, joining me now is Mustafa Kibaroglu, who is the chair of the Department of Political Science and International Relations at MEF University, and Sean Michael Cox, who is a lecturer at Bahçeşehir University. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here on Straight Talk. Sean, let me start off with you. What's the real crisis in NATO? Is it President Trump's sort of rhetoric? Is it Russia? Or is it Turkey? Or is it all of the above?
Honestly, there isn't really a crisis in NATO per se. A lot of it has to do with perception and the shenanigans of Donald Trump. There were expectations of this recent summit reinforcing the role of NATO in the future, how they would come together as an organization to face challenges along Turkey's southern border, to face challenges of a rising Russia, challenges of a rising China. But generally speaking, it's business as usual. There are always little crises popping up all over, and they did more or less a good job in damping down any concerns that NATO could be threatened as an organization.
You say it's perception, but the reality is that relations between Turkey and NATO have soured. 60 years ago, Turkey was an important strategic NATO ally in the Cold War, standing tough against the Soviet Union. It fought alongside the allies in Korea, played an important role in Afghanistan and in the Balkans. In more recent years, we've seen relations sour. What's behind this?
Well, actually, Turkey stands where it used to stand for the past 66 years, and that's why Turkey was called by its allies as a staunch ally. And Turkey did its job properly and contributed to the security and safety of the Western world by attracting the attention of the Soviet Union onto itself and also risking its own devastation, because Turkey's force posture was towards the Soviet border to the northeastern part of Turkey, and thanks to it, most part of the Western world and our Western allies in Western Europe could spend more on their economy rather than defense spending. So Turkey had done its job also properly by contributing to the peacemaking operations all over the place, from Afghanistan to Africa, and also on high seas in the Indian Ocean, etc. So Turkey stands where it is. The perception of the some of the European allies has changed, and this is not because of Turkey as a whole. And there's also other reasons that we cannot discuss this in detail here. But I would like to emphasize that Turkey values its NATO membership more than most NATO members valuing Turkey's membership and contribution.
It's a sort of a partnership that's valued by both sides. But one of the points of contention between Turkey and NATO is Turkey's desire to purchase the S-400 air defense system from the Russians. There was a summit in Brussels. Here's what the U.S. ambassador to NATO had to say. Let's have a listen.
We are very worried about this S-400 that Turkey says they are going to buy from Russia. That would be a terrible blow because it will affect the interoperability of our NATO airplanes, our NATO equipment.
So that's what the NATO ambassador had to say. Why is Turkey wanting to go ahead with the purchase of this air defense system?
Well, prior to that, I would like to emphasize that back in 2010 at the Lisbon summit in Portugal, Turkey was also blamed for obstructing the creation of missile shield, which was not the case at all. And also, when it comes to the purchase of the Russian air defense system, I mean, prior to that, there was this Chinese deal, which was also criticized harshly. But that Chinese deal as well came after long deliberations within the Turkish sort of defense industry and related institutions with the government after long deliberation and long discussion with our partners in the West, and none of which agreed to sell proper air defenses to Turkey. And Turkey was left with no other option but to provide this to its own people, because no matter how effective missile shield could be, we know for a fact, it's a fact, at least for the foreseeable future, at least half or 1/3 of Turkey's eastern and southeastern part will not be covered by the missile shield. And Turkey and the government has to take some precautions, the measures that would provide shelter and to an air defense system to that part of the country. So after all, and I know also from my conversation with people within NATO who have occupied high positions that indeed there could be some technical solutions by providing some interfaces. But what was told to me during this conversation that it is indeed a political decision rather than technical one. So indeed the interoperability could be achieved between the Turkish national air defense system and NATO's missile shield, but this is not the one that is desired for some serious concerns that there could be some flows, some interference with the Russians, etc.
Okay, Sean, we just heard what Mustafa said, and we heard from the U.S. ambassador to NATO talking about interoperability issues. Is that what is at the heart of this, or are we seeing the bloc seeing Turkey drift more into sort of the sphere of Russian influence? Is that the concern?
Well, there is a technical issue and there is a political issue as well. NATO would like Turkey to be dependent on the countries within NATO, such as Germany, such as the UK, such as the United States, that sell these type of weapons. And I don't want to say it's sort of a hostage situation, but they were keeping Turkey in such a position by insisting that they only use NATO allied approved weapons systems, and it was leaving Turkey exposed. Now the strategy to a certain extent has actually worked in Turkey purchasing the S-400 systems, because the Italian Patriot batteries here, they agreed at this summit to extend its deployment in Turkey for an additional year. So now they are starting to get the attention that they want, the political attention for the crisis. Now the interoperability from a technical perspective, it is feasible to make these systems interoperable, but there's also a great concern in terms of safety and security in getting Russian software access to NATO systems, much like they have the same type of concern with the Chinese. And that is a very real concern as well.
And with the 5th generation F-35 fighter jet sort of going to come out in the market, that's a big issue.
That's what, this is the reason why some people, as well as politicians in the United States, in the House, in the Congress, are trying to blockade the sale of F-35s. But well, when it comes to other allies and some other partners like Sweden, Portugal, Spain, Australia, which is not a member, United States did not prevent sale of some high-tech instruments and also sharing technology. But when it comes to Turkey, everything is blockaded. So Turkey is left with no other option but to make such deals. But this doesn't mean that Turkey is drifting from its way which it used to walk all along the past 66 years. So
you say it's blocked, but there was a tone of unity coming out of the Brussels summit. I'm looking at the summit declaration from Brussels.
Turkey's air defense.
And according to Article 23, it says tailored assurance measures for Turkey to respond to the growing security challenges from the south, contribute to the security of the alliance as a whole. So my question to you, Mustafa, is NATO sort of playing the same old tune? Is this enough for Turkey? And how sensitive is NATO to Turkey's security concerns?
Well, whoever starts talking about Turkey's position should look at the map first, where Turkey stands surrounded with all these very interesting countries like Syria, Iraq, Iran, Russia, and this is not a very nice and quiet neighborhood. It's not like Switzerland, or it's not like Sweden, it's not like Portugal. So Turkey has a number of security challenges, and Turkey is 60 million population, a big country which has big ambitions, of course, and big past history. So Turkey could not be treated as a medium-sized, mediocre country. Turkey's security concerns must be properly understood, and Turkey must be offered some sort of tangible solutions which would make people feel like, okay, we are part of the West and they stand with us all the time, all along the way, not just sporadically one-off over a long period of time.
Sean, I'm going to give the last word to you. If any solution in Syria is going to be possible, Turkey and Russia have to be at the table. One, you have a country that's neighboring Syria. It hosts 3.5 million refugees in the country. The other is a very staunch supporter of the Assad regime. Are we seeing sort of countries' national interests pose a potential threat to the unity of the alliance?
That's not necessarily the case, because the national interest of countries like Austria and like Germany and France also require a resolution to the situation in Syria. And they're not able to take a solid place at the table because of their distance and their lack of relationship with the parties involved. In this instance, it makes only sense that Turkey and Russia should take the lead in helping resolve this, and that will in fact strengthen NATO's position.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much for this talk.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.